Yes! It is finally done! Look at that speed! We are flying now!
For a long time, I was a dedicated ride-or-die Bootstrap fanboy. I actively resisted Tailwind because writing endless utility classes feels like inlining styles straight out of 1999, completely defying standard CSS cascading structure. But I recently built TrendForge using Tailwind v4 and Fly-On UI, and I was over the freaking moon with how it came out. I mean, just look at this thing. It's gorgeous. I actually got insanely jealous that my main site, human.com, didn't look that good. It didn't stand up to what I had just built. Years ago, I created a paid Bootstrap dashboard theme with a cyberpunk layout. And again, try as I might, it wasn't half as good as this new Tailwind setup. It's not even a fair comparison. Tailwind Punk just looks, feels, and handles better than Bootstrap Punk. I say all that because I want to be clear. I know Bootstrap, I love Bootstrap, and I've used it personally and professionally for years. While it served me well, the point of this video is to say I'm over it. In good conscience, I could not recommend it and would not use it for any projects going forward. And if you stick with me through this whole video, you're gonna see what I mean. Beyond the design aesthetics, there is a massive shift in the modern development workflow that absolutely no one is talking about. Okay, well actually everyone is talking about it. AI copilots. But what I think is being left out of the conversation is that regardless of model, Claude, Cursor, Grok, Gemini, they all code UI layouts by default with Tailwind. It is infinitely easier for an LLM to spit out structured Tailwind classes or components from ecosystems like Daisy UI and Fly-On UI than anything else. Trying to get an AI model to learn your custom, deeply nested SCSS classes and proprietary mixins is a shortcut to hallucination city. In fact, this AI bias is so aggressive, it is literally breaking business model. Tailwind's creator recently revealed that while framework adoption is at an all-time high, their actual documentation traffic plummeted by roughly 80%. Why? Because tools like Cursor, Claude have ingested Tailwind so completely that developers never have to leave their IDEs anymore. The AI is the documentation, and it defaults to Tailwind because it treats utility classes like the assembly language of the web. There is a massive technical reason for this. LLMs generate code linearly, token by token. For an AI to write traditional CSS, it has to constantly context switch between files, invent semantic class names, and then map them across your code base, which completely taxes its attention span. Tailwind eliminates that friction entirely. By keeping the styling directly inside the HTML using a strict mathematical vocabulary, the AI can build complex, responsive layouts faster, cheaper, and with zero context switching. For a human coder, it might seem like Tailwind is too much inlining, but for LLMs, it is their assembly language for front-end code generation. Besides context savings, Tailwind also helps with the naming problem. For an AI, inventing consistent, logical, and semantic class names over a large code base is a recipe for chaos. Tailwind provides a deterministic vocabulary. The LLM doesn't have to think about what to name a container, it just applies a strict mathematical set of design tokens, such as flex, item center, padding 4, gap 2. Finally, another major reason LLMs are like children. They parrot what their parents do. And in this case, because the front-end landscape was absolutely saturated with Tailwind when they were born, that is the language they learned to speak in. Honestly, we should just be thankful these models weren't invented 20 years ago. If they were, your AI copilot wouldn't be writing CSS. It would instruct you to use Photoshop to slice a JPEG into 50 pieces and forcing you to debug a nested HTML table layout. Praise be to Code Jesus that instead of Claude cranking out React components, it's not forcing your users to install Macromedia Flash while using ActionScript 2 and a timeline to make your drop-down menu. you hate Tailwind, I get it. I've gotten into plenty of serious and humorous conversations on both sides of Reddit regarding this regarded topic. But the fact of the matter is, if you're trying to get stuff done without burning through your token allowance, the best thing to do is work with the LLM, not against it. So if you don't at least know some Tailwind, you're doing yourself a major disservice, and at the very least, you're going to be burning through more tokens, crafting more complex prompt, and dealing with all the negative externalities that brings the more you keep on strapping it on. You dig? Now, with all that being said, let's get back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity. We won't give up that easy. We ain't going broke-ass bootstrap because we ain't stagnant. We're dope and you know it. Oh, okay, I'll stop. And if you subscribe to my channel, I promise to never do that again. Anywho, for reals though, what I'm telling you is shit I learned the hard way. Shit I didn't want to be true because I didn't want to ditch the framework I spent so much time with. But mono, no cap, for real, I'm glad I did it. If it was just for AI conformity, maybe you could make the case it's not worth it. But as you're going to see, the page speed data doesn't lie. And in my humble opinion, that's the final nail in the Big B's coffin. I literally spent about 3 to 4 days, basically a long weekend, to completely refactor the front end of Human.com, keeping the Statamic backend completely identical while ripping out Bootstrap 5. Before we get too deep into the tables, I want to edge you guys just a little bit longer and say that if you're relying solely on basic browser tools to audit your site, you're doing yourself a disservice. I'll get more into some of the traps that Google Chrome's performance testing can cause, but safe to say it's far from perfect and often relies only on pure numbers and leaves out how a real human would perceive the actual loading of the site. To solve this, and what I can't recommend enough, is sitespeed.io. Sitespeed is totally free, super easy to set up, and uses screen recorded video analyzation alongside standard stopwatching waterfall graphs to provide results more in line with how a real person is going to actually perceive the speed of your pages. Also, the way Sitespeed breaks down the results and makes page performance easy to understand can't be overstated. They really do an amazing job presenting a literal boatload of data in an easily digestible way. No confusing waterfall graphs and nat charts, and instead simple numbers that anyone can understand. The rest of this video, any of the stats you see, all come from various Sitespeed runs. Alright, enough fluff, let's see the goods already. Here it is, the raw, unvarnished data. Now, if you really want to get into this data, stare and compare, it is available on Human.com as soon as this video is live. And before any of you Bootstrap defenders go commenting about biases, to completely eliminate local machine variance like background apps stealing CPU cycles, every stat was pulled from a strict Dockerized Sitespeed.io profile. By capturing frame-by-frame video and generating raw network HAR files across 3 distinct runs, we extracted the true median performance average. Going into this, I thought my site was already well optimized. I was getting scores of 84 plus in Lighthouse with clean green indicators everywhere, but standard browser synthetic tests lie. Now, that's not to say my site was horribly slow, but as you're about to see, I had a lot to improve on. If you would like to run your own before and after tests, you can find the exact script I used here, along with all our other free open source offerings. Alright, look at the baseline wreckage. The homepage was a massive data monster, registering a total transfer size of 10.8 megabytes. Loading my homepage transferred more data across the wire than downloading the entire original game files for Doom. The biggest bottleneck, large full-screen banner images and heavy layout code spanning across 1920 pixels. The framework was dragging its feet and our baseline stats proved it. This is despite the fact I was using Vite.js, compressing my assets, selectively loading styles on a per page basis, and doing quite a bit to optimize things. One important thing to realize is that under 900 milliseconds is ideal. If you can get your page to load in that amount of time, it will be perceived by your users as instantly loading. It's important that you're designing for humans and how humans use technology, not for clankers and how they behave. If you look closely at these other baseline numbers, you'll spot a massive performance paradox. The tools claim the initial first paint happened in under 500 milliseconds, but to a real human user, the screen remains completely empty for a full second. This is what engineers call a ghost paint, a mismatch between programmatic data and human perception. This happens due to two major architectural flaws. First, the invisible font trap, where the browser logs a successful content paint but renders the text completely transparent because the custom web font is still stuck downloading over the network. Second, empty layout shell commits. Legacy monolithic frameworks like Bootstrap create deeply nested element trees. The browser engine renders an empty global background container wireframe, stops its internal execution clock early, and claims victory while the user stares at a blank void. Bootstrap is notorious for this. Because of the way it creates that deeply nested div content, your tools will think something has been drawn, but in reality, it only started creating those huge div nests. This issue was causing me to think my site was actually much faster than it was in reality. Now here's where things get good. Look at what happened the exact second we switched the architecture over to Tailwind version 4. Across the entire site, our total payload weight absolutely vaporized, dropping by an average of 66%. Total network requests fell by 40%, and layout stability became absolutely bulletproof armor. Because Tailwind's utility architecture cleanly anchors container grids, our cumulative layout shift dropped to a flawless, perfect 0. If you're looking to pull off a refactor like this yourself, here's a massive time saver hack, by the way. Use a CLI tool called Tailwindo. It automatically scans your legacy markup and converts standard Bootstrap utility classes into their modern Tailwind equivalents, letting you jump straight into cleaning up the custom design tokens. This was a huge time saver and made the whole refactor process that much easier. Now, it wasn't a clean sweep across the board. The cold hard data showed some intense metric inflation. Our last visual change dragged out to 6.4 seconds on the homepage, and our article views first paint spiked past 1 second. Why? Because we purposely left our static media assets completely unoptimized to keep the core framework to framework battle perfectly fair. Now, I want to mention that this refactor, it wasn't a one-to-one refactor. If you look at the before human site, it wasn't anything special. It was cool, but it wasn't that detailed. And so not only did I pick up massive performance gains, the new Tailwind version of the site is drop dead sexy. I got a massive performance boost and a huge design boost with this awesome cyberpunk style futuristic layout that I could not be happier with. So even though I added a much more complex layout, I still got massive performance gains, and honestly I could have left it there. However, in for a penny, in for a pound. And I decided that now that I had gathered the stats on the framework difference, there was one more mountain to cross. Taking all of these giant PNG assets and turning them into the futuristic WebP counterpart. That is where we saw the final massive performance gain for the site. And that is going to be the subject of the next section. Welcome to Phase 3, the WebP Ultimate Speed Boost. We migrated the entire media asset pipeline to WebP, cleaned up our backend caching layers, and stripped complex, nested layout logic directly out of the Statamic Antlers templates, moving those heavy presentation calculations into a clean backend service class. These results speak for themselves. Our first paint time experienced a massive 26% acceleration, dropping down to a blistering 586 milliseconds. Total payload weight sliced down to 1.6 megabytes. And overall speed index dropped to 882 milliseconds, shattering that sub 900 millisecond barrier where a website feels completely instantaneous to a human brain. Woo, we did it! What makes these final numbers even crazier is our infrastructure context. Human.com isn't running on high-end enterprise edge routing networks or hosted in a massive AWS data center. The entire platform is completely home-labbed on basic consumer-grade hardware right here in the studio. Despite that constraint, this new architectural refactor absolutely crushed it. Originally, I had been thinking that the WebP conversion was going to be its own YouTube video, just assuming that getting it to happen was going to be kind of a process. And if you've been putting it off, I honestly stopped putting it off. Not only did it give me these massive performance gains that I wouldn't have got anywhere else, but it was actually really easy. Even for a site where you have all this existing content spanning over years, I was able to quickly move from PNG images to WebP images in a long afternoon. Honestly, it was so much easier than I thought. There are a number of different ways you can do this. You could use Cloudflare's proxy. You could set up your own proxy. Personally, what I did was built a Python script, found all my old assets, manually converted them to WebP, and then added a script to my Statamic backend for any future assets to automatically get converted to WebP going forward. And that was it. I was done. Everything was converted over. And honestly, that's kind of it for this video. Hopefully it's inspired you to make your own site faster, and hopefully given you some ideas on how you can not only figure out if you're getting faster, but what tools to use to determine what fast even means to you and your pages. Again, a huge shout out to sitespeed.io. Their toolkit for this is invaluable. There's a reason it's basically the industry standard. Also, I hope that I've maybe brought some of you out of the dark and into the light in terms of the Bootstrap versus Tailwind debate. I know I brought myself kicking and screaming, but now that I'm here, I've never been happier, and my websites have never looked as good as they do now. So yeah, please check out my human site, leave a comment, let me know what you think. If this video was helpful, let me know. Subscribe, please. I'm really trying to grow this channel. All right, well, I will hopefully see you guys in the next video. Peace.